When most people think about leadership, they think about authority. They think about being the person in charge, the person making the decisions, the person giving orders. And if we're honest, that's why often leadership seems appealing when we're younger. The idea of being the one who gets to tell everyone else what to do, it sounds pretty good. But over time, I've learned something surprising. The best leaders I've ever worked with gave the fewest orders. One of my favorite leadership books is Leaders Eat Last by Simon Sinek. In it, he shares a great story about a submarine captain named Captain David Marquette and a powerful leadership principle. The goal of a leader is to give no orders. Now, when I first heard that, it sounded kind of backwards. How can a leader be a leader without giving orders? Isn't that kind of the whole point? But Marquette explains that leaders should provide direction with intent while allowing others to determine how to accomplish the mission. Think about that for a moment. The goal isn't to create followers who just obey orders. The goal is to create people who can think. There's another line from that same section of the book that stuck with me for years. Responsibility is not doing as we are told. That's obedience. Responsibility is doing what is right. That distinction, well, changes everything. Because obedience only works when someone is standing there giving you orders and instructions. Responsibility, however, works when nobody is watching. And that's the difference between managing tasks and developing people. I learned this lesson firsthand from a project leader I worked with for several years. When I first joined the team, I asked a lot of questions. And I mean, a lot. Why are we doing it this way? Why does this matter? Why did you choose that option? Why not this one? At first, I was trying to learn the rules. But eventually, I started to learn something much more important. I started to learn his logic. I began to understand how he thought. I could predict which issues would require his attention and which ones I could handle myself. I learned what factors mattered most when making decisions for him. And after enough time, something interesting happened. Questions stopped reaching his desk. Not because they disappeared, but because they were getting answered before they ever needed to reach him. One day, I made a decision on his behalf. Unfortunately, it was the wrong one. And when he found out, he asked why the decision had been made that way. I explained that I believed it was exactly what he would have chosen, and why. He smiled and said, not this time. Not the right call. The issue was corrected quite easily, and everyone moved on quite quickly. But I wasn't quite satisfied. Afterwards, I asked if we could talk for a second. I wanted to understand why his decision was different from the one I expected, the one I had predicted. Not because I wanted to argue, because I wanted to improve. I wanted to better understand the logic. I wanted to know what variable I had missed. And that's when something important happened. He took the time to explain it. Not just the answer, but the reasoning behind the answer. A few days later, he asked me something during a team meeting. He said, "How many questions do you answer each day? Like, that never make it to me." So I opened my chat history, and message after message, question after question, dozens of conversations. People asking for guidance, people looking for answers, people trying to move projects forward. And his reaction was priceless, because he realized something. The investment he had made in teaching me how to think had multiplied his effectiveness. He wasn't just creating an employee who followed instructions. He's creating another leader. And that's what great leadership does. Poor leadership creates dependency. Great leadership creates capability. Poor leadership says, ask me before you do anything. Great leadership says, here's the mission. Here's what matters. Now go figure it out. Poor leadership creates bottlenecks. Great leadership creates ownership. Poor leadership trains people to comply. Great leadership trains people to think. The challenge is that teaching people to think, it takes longer. It's easier to give an answer than explain the reasoning behind it. It's easier to solve the problem than coach someone through the solving it technique for themselves. It's easier in the short term, but in the long term, it creates teams that can't function without you. And if your team can't operate when you're gone, then you've built dependence, not leadership. The best leaders understand that mistakes are part of the process. People will make incorrect decisions. They'll miss details, and occasionally they'll get it wrong. And that's okay. Because every mistake becomes an opportunity to improve their judgment. Every conversation becomes a chance to transfer wisdom. Every question becomes a chance to develop another leader. And eventually, something remarkable happens. You stop being the only person carrying the mission. You become surrounded by people who understand the mission, people who can think, people who can lead, people who don't need constant instructions because they understand the intent behind the work. So my challenge for you today is simple. Whether you're leading a family, a team, a business, or a community, ask yourself this question. Are you teaching people what to do, or are you teaching them how to think? Because the greatest measure of leadership isn't how many people follow your instructions, it's how many leaders exist because of your influence. The best leaders don't create followers, they create more leaders. And that's where real impact begins.